Welcome to the Generational Icons podcast. I'm your host, Hira.
And this is Shaquille. We have a fantastic episode with a fantastic guest. I don't think, like I said, I usually say this about all of our guests, right? Like they're icons and things like that. But this gentleman here is truly an icon and a scholar in his own right, in his own way. He's a father. And forgive me, Dr. Khan, if I have missed anything. He's a father, husband, entrepreneur, doctor, and the CEO of Khan Tutorials, right? So ladies and gentlemen, for those who are watching at home, please give a big round of applause to Dr. Ivan Khan. Welcome.
Thanks so much, everyone. It's such a privilege to be here. Thank you for having me today.
Yes, no, thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day, doing this interview with us. And we spoke about this briefly a few minutes ago, right? What the reason why we did this podcast is really to highlight South Asians and their story and, the immigrant story and kind of where they were from before and where they are today. So we usually have 3 segments in our show. The first segment is called Culture and Identity. Second segment is Health and Wellness. And the third segment is Financial Independence.
Incredible.
And part of Culture and Identity, what we love to hear from you. Obviously, you have so many more titles and you have so many more accomplishments that I didn't say, but I wanted to hear from you, and our audience would love to hear from you.
You guys are being way too kind. I did not pay you guys to say this stuff, but I appreciate hearing it. Thank you so much.
No, absolutely. I love your story, and I'm so very excited for everyone else to hear your story.
Of course.
So as part of Culture and Identity, the reason why we called it Culture and Identity as our segment is because we feel like who you are today and what your background was and how your upbringing was really, it truly shapes on where you are today and where you're going, right? And we believe that culture does play a part in your identity today.
100%.
So if you don't mind kind of sharing your story from the very beginning, I know you guys are the pioneers and your dad has been, the legend in this space. But yeah, if you don't mind.
Thank you so much. I think a lot of times when you get that question, like, who are you? Where are you from? As New Yorkers, we're like, yeah, where you're from. And you kind of know it means 2 things, like where'd you grow up and where are you originally from. So I think the combination of that and my identity, I always consider myself a Bangladeshi New Yorker. Mm-hmm. I've been a New Yorker since the mid 80s. My family, we came to the States in the mid 1985 because my dad had an opportunity to do his PhD. That's the only reason we came here. And our plan was to go back to Bangladesh. His plan was to work in Dhaka University or at the World Bank or something like that. Things changed as, we settled here for different reasons, and I'll get into that. Mm-hmm. But if you ask me my identity, it's I'm a Bangladeshi New Yorker from Queens, and I've also had the privilege of just working in communities that include the Bronx, Brooklyn, and getting a chance to live in Harlem during college and med school. So, New York is really where my personal pride comes from.
Yeah, that's awesome. Would you mind kind of sharing what was your upbringing like, right? Like, I mean, in more of a deeper detail, like transitioning from where you were, right, to how you grew up and going to med school and all that stuff. Can you kind of tell us what your life was like? Because your dad is a pioneer. Yeah, I would say a pioneer in his own right of. So I think by happenstance, right? Like kind of creating this company. And this organization.
it was.
You guys are educators, like the family.
It was, and we appreciate having the opportunity to come into the tutoring and education space at a time when the community was small enough. So when I was first here in 1987, we were, like most immigrants, you start off in a 1-bedroom apartment, you share with a roommate. And then as your dad and mom work hard, you can, inshallah, see if you can move into a 2-bedroom apartment or, lose the roommate that's not a family, that's not your blood relative. Yeah. So that was it for us in Elmhurst growing up. 1-bedroom apartment, 2-bedroom apartment. My mom started completing her coursework to do her master's. And as she got an opportunity to become a teacher, a substitute teacher, they took a chance at a home in South Ozone Park in 1989. So if you ask me where I'm from, it's Queens, and it's South Ozone Park, Elmhurst. Those are the places where I have most of my childhood memories. And then my daddy had passed away when I was in 5th grade, 3 days before I turned 10.
She was here.
She was in Bangladesh. So I had no cousins here growing up. Most of my cousins were all over the world. And my dad, his two biggest dreams was to complete his PhD and for me to become a doctor. And when my daddy got sick with cancer, it kind of put our family upside down, and it was a whirlwind of decisions for him. We didn't have our green card yet, but he still risked it all, went back home to, wave goodbye to her and spend some time with her. And we didn't know if he was going to be allowed to come back in if he didn't have his visa. So my mom and I were just home praying and scared, ready to lose her. So I think that changed the course of our family, in that my mom and I moved to Bangladesh for a year and a half in 6th grade. So I did not spend 6th grade in the States. It was all in Bangladesh. I went to Scholastica English medium school. Okay. I lived in Dhaka, 26 number. I got to learn the language properly. I got to learn my salat and namaj properly. And it was an incredible time. But we came back because these schools called Stuyvesant, Bronx Science, and Brooklyn Tech, specialized high schools. My father had seen that some other family friends had gotten in. And then one day my mom woke me up and she said, Ivan, uto, your dad wants us to move back. So I was like, what do you mean? I thought we're moving here for Dada, because Daddy passed away, So we moved back here so we could I could get a chance to go to the specialized high schools and get a chance to be a doctor. So this is like a special time of year for us.
So he moved back to the States first while you guys were still there? Or you guys moved together?
We just moved
back here.
My mom and I just moved, so he had to finish his PhD.
Okay.
He stayed back. It was like me, my mom, and my dada.
In Bangladesh. Was that a culture shock for you in Bangladesh? Because you grew up here, right? Yeah, like one of the barriers that I would be like, am I going to be able to speak the language properly and like adjust in Bangladesh?
The language wasn't that bad.
And the writing and reading.
The writing, reading language, and learning your culture was really fun. Awesome. I think the biggest adjustment was like the bugs and the roaches and
the mosquito nets.
Yeah, and like just like
I don't know how you do that, but I can't do that.
The sanitation but I'm a 10-year-old kid, and
right.
You're also learning a lot about your poverty identity. We're growing up here in school. Whenever you got asked where you're from, it's like my family's from Bangladesh. My family's from Bangladesh. Like, oh, where is that? And you're like, that's next to India. And then so you have to keep explaining that.
Oh, yes. Right.
So,
sometimes, yeah.
When I got to live there and see up close the suffering by children in the slums, it reminds you how lucky we all are getting any opportunity in the world. Those are things that we've all faced as immigrants, children of immigrants, when we go back home and we see all the kids run up to the car trying to sell some flowers or, asking for a little money. And so when I lived there for a year and a half and that kind of became our environment, you got that balance of being a kid from Queens, but thrown into Dhanmondi and Dhaka.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Yeah. It's one of the things I want to do with my kids in the future is expose them to, our culture, our heritage, and say, hey, this is Bangladesh, right? You might be living a kind of life here in America and New York, but it can be quite different from where we are.
I hope you get a chance to do that. My children are 12 and 9, and I really want to take them to Bangladesh, and I'm looking forward for the right opportunity.
Yeah, awesome. I can imagine. Wow. I mean, I know you got a little emotional.
Yeah.
When you're talking about your dad and just kind of your upbringing growing up. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. It's a topic I visit often in our work.
Yeah. And I think it's important, right? Because for people to know who you are and what your upbringing was like, because they always see this one side of you, maybe the business side, and they might not see the personal side. But it's really touching. And I think you mentioned, did your daddy also pass away from cancer?
Yeah. So my daddy passed away from liver cancer. And as a lot of folks in medicine and healthcare may know, before the hepatitis vaccine, Things like Hep B and Hep A were very, common in South Asia.
Yes.
And a grandmother can get hepatitis, from non-sanitary conditions in the food or whatever, and then that can lead to cirrhosis, which can lead to liver cancer. So she was young, and it was kind of unexpected and kind of a rapid decline. So my father's cancer, which is bone marrow cancer, he was diagnosed in 2002. So, hers may have been more of an environmental nature. I'm not certain, the reasons for bone marrow cancer can be so many different things. And my dad did spend some time in the USSR. He was a construction worker in Ukraine, and he spent his summers working in buildings. So I'm not sure if there was any environmental exposures for him in his youth.
Yeah, wow. USSR, oh my God.
Yeah, that's so my name is Ivan,
Right.
pronounced Ivan, because my parents met each other in Ukraine as Bangladeshi students.
Yeah.
They happened to meet as university students, and when they got married later, and I was born, they wanted to commemorate Ukraine.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Yeah.
Sorry, very, very
International,
That's awesome. Do you feel like you transitioned into the education world because of your mom and dad, or do you feel like your culture and your upbringing kind of pushed you towards that, or were you planning on doing something different growing up, right? Like, as us, we're always prone to or pushed to doctors, engineers, like the typical careers.
Which his dad did, right? He wanted to become a doctor. That's one of the wishes that is...
That's right, Ira. Yeah, that's right. So I think a lot of folks may know that my dad's main goal was to, stay here in America so I could become a physician. Since I was 12, getting into the Sophie Davis program was kind of brainwashed. I was sort of programmed to become a strong applicant for that program.
And it's also not easy to get into that.
It was challenging to get into, and it was probably 5 times more challenging to survive in, like to pass on time and get through all the stuff while my dad was sick. He wanted me to be a physician, and I don't think I ever knew what I wanted to be until I was 20. And by now I'm like already a 3rd year in med school. So it was a little late to change course. And while it's never too late to change your course, I don't think I was willing to. I had started that program with my friends, and I wanted to graduate with them, and I didn't want to leave and quit something that I'd started.
Yeah.
So I worked to complete my medical degree, and a week or two before my graduation, I sat my parents down and I told them, hey, I know I want to do something like management, and I don't want to do clinical medicine, like chikitsa, like clinical. And they had to accept that. My father had a tough time accepting it because he really wanted to be able to say, hey, my son's a resident in that hospital where that, but inshallah, the work that we were able to do through focusing more on consultorial, he made sure to communicate that he was happy with that choice.
MashaAllah, yeah. No, that's very big because, one of the reasons why a lot of our parents might want us to get into the medical field and things like that is so that way we benefit and help society, right? And in this case, health, right?
Also personal prizing, right?
And it's sort of, I see it as like how much you benefit community and society as well. And what you're doing with contutorial is building up the future doctors and engineers and so forth.
I think all of us are children of, survivors of genocide, survivors of liberation movement of 1971. And my father-in-law was both a physician and a muktijidda as a freedom fighter. So I think our parents' generation grew up seeing a lack of healthcare, lack of doctors, lack of access, and there was a terrible massacre where they killed all the intellectuals, over and over. So those types of things, and my father is a economist, a PhD student, and very proud Bangladeshi. So I think all of those things tie together to become something so you can give back to Bangladesh. It's always that, right? কিছু করো, give দেশের জন্য কিছু করো. So I think for him, being an educator, he wanted to have me give my impact through healthcare. And it may have been him living vicariously through me a little bit. But when I was old enough to realize that, hey, I'd rather help create more physicians than be one myself. And, went right to it. And alhamdulillah, we're really proud of all the Khan's alum who've not only been teachers, students for us, but teachers for us and leaders for us. And they're clinicians, anesthesiologists, surgeons, primary care physicians. I could name them all, but
I definitely want to focus on. So our second segment is focused on health and wellness, right? That transition for you, you've witnessed a lot of things growing up within your family, right? With your dad passing away, they passing away. And if it's so emotional, you can always stop us.
That's okay.
But I mean, you're an incredibly strong person, I have to say. And I'm sure it comes from your dad and your mom and everyone else. Because for you to, I don't want to say survive, but for you to kind of witness and go through the tragedies that you have gone through, right? Makes you obviously into a stronger, better man, husband, father, all those things, a leader in the community and in the higher education space as well. What do you think, like, in terms of like how important do you think mental health is? Because you've gone through a lot from a young kid even till now. How important do you think mental health is in our community, but also in the type of job that you do, right?
I think mental health is the most important thing that South Asians, Bangladeshis, as Muslims, as Hindus, as people of our community, we should be talking about. I think I think everyone's goes through their own hardship. So when I was going through my biggest hardship as a youth, which was seeing my dad battle for his life for 12 years, that was during med school, and having to get through my education, which is really tough, while seeing my father fight for his life, and me and my mother do everything we can to support that. But I also do recognize that everyone goes through their own hardship and tragedy.
Sure.
I think sometimes the difference, sometimes if I had to really think about, for me, some of it was in a public space. So losing my father and going through losing my dad while knowing that he was a close teacher and a close uncle to so many people. Grieving in front of the community wasn't an easy thing.
Yeah.
So I think my natural intuition then was to keep myself guarded and
Busy.
Put on a shield to try to hide the pain. And I think that did a lot of damage to anyone, myself, like to suppress your grief or to have it solely behind closed doors as much as I tried. So hats off to my wife, Nipa, for getting me through that time. And hats off to some of our teammates for being a part of that. But I think going through that publicly with a lot of folks sharing that grief while knowing it's a little deeper for my mom and I, and my wife and my children, that was the tough part. So I think I realized that 5 years later in 2019 that, oh my gosh, I was running around hiding and suppressing my grief to appear, to make sure that the company remained strong. There were enough bad actors out there who tried to take advantage of my dad's passing to advance their business at the cost of ours, and some unethical things, and it was really off-putting. So I knew there was at least one or two bad actors out there waiting for that opportunity to kind of attack our company. So, my first and foremost intuition was to protect my staff, protect my mom, protect our students, protect my family.
And your father's legacy.
Right? Yeah, and his legacy as well. And I don't ever feel like I have to do that too much, because alhamdulillah, his legacy with his students and his
lives on.
That kind of lives on. But to your point, it is my responsibility to carry that torch,
right,
for the benefit of his vision, which is to do more for Bangladesh. And that's why I was here, to carry my dad's legacy. So to mental health in 2019, I told my wife that I think it's important that I speak to a therapist. And I started speaking to a therapist for the last 5 years. It's been pretty regular. I think it's one of the most important conversations I have regularly outside of the daily check-ins with my wife. I think at home, my wife and I want to be sure that we are there for each other as much as we can, but we also have the freedom to not rely on just each other for everything. It's important to be there for your partner and your spouse, but it's also really important to get that support professionally from someone. So I don't talk about it much, but I think it's so important as a parent that my children know that I speak to someone and we promote it at home, speaking to a mental health provider, a therapist, whatever. And I think it's one of the most important things I've been able to do for myself. Yeah. While we're on the topic of mental health, personally, namaj and salat is also another beautiful complement, to making sure to maintain that chance to mentally check out and have that meditative moment to be one with your faith and your spirituality. So how do we get our kids to embrace this,
That was going to be my next question, actually.
So anything that we see that benefits us at home, Nipa and myself, or benefits my children, or benefits our team, we want to be sure to recreate it and make sure it's available for all of our students at Cons for free. So college guidance and finding your path and career path, we have had 2 counselors from Harvard create these college admissions videos, and now it's given for free to all of our high schoolers. So my question was, how do we get the mental health problem solved for the 3 through 8, for 3 through 12, for K through 12? So
they might be stressed out, right? Especially when they have a lot of these specialized tests that they're preparing for. I must succeed because this is going to be my sort of golden ticket to getting, a leg up in whatever career I want to pursue. So they're under stress.
So the thing that really quick, sorry to interrupt you. You opened a whole nother. I think we're gonna have a bit long conversation on this. So my wife and I, we're very big on education, especially. Now I'm gonna try not to get emotional on my side. So we're very big on education, especially my wife. My life has changed meeting my wife. My life has changed through education. So we really, and so I'm really happy we're having this interview because it is close to home. So we're very big on, like I said, education, but we also push our child, our 9-year-old, to do bigger and better, right? Because I always say this, that talent distributes evenly, but opportunity does not. And so I believe Khan Tutorials gives those opportunities out there, right? And other organizations out there do the same. And so what I'm trying to do is instill that mindset, obviously, for him, like education is key. But I feel like sometimes I'm pushing to, my wife and I had this conversation recently, that I'm pushing too hard for them to, and not thinking about their mental health.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you have to be, like, as people of color, you have to work 10 times as harder, right? You have to be more resilient than you have ever been. Like, I mean, you're a perfect
Yeah,
example
the
of that.
systemic racism is global.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And so I'm telling him, like, you know, A is like, you got to get A+, or you have to do 10 times better. But what I'm not realizing, and what my wife had to bring me to my attention, was the mental health aspect.
Yeah.
Like, you can't just put too much onto it. So I know you were talking about that a little bit.
So I think to tie in your point and Here's point, the stress and anxiety at home starts long before the exam.
Yeah.
And the stress and anxiety and the distraction and the dopamine depletion of our phones and our iPad and our video games starts from like age 1 and 2. The second the screen is in front of our children, it's changing the way their brains are developing. And I struggle with my own 2 children how to instill screen time limits. I struggle with myself and in my home how to instill screen time limits. So I believe that one of the most important things we have to continuously advise from the youngest possible ages are things along emotional intelligence, which is really important for all of us at Cons. And, you know, in the simplest way, even if in emotional intelligence can be broken into the 4 or 5 basic components of self-awareness, empathy, intrinsic motivation, delaying gratification, and social skills. You know, those are the big 5 things within emotional intelligence that we try to instill in our home, in all of our leadership training several times a year. And well, having seen that all the top business schools are teaching this, and it's easy stuff. It's like, if corporations are spending tens of thousands of dollars to teach this for their degree in professional development, why can't we give this for free to a 3rd grader at Conservatorial? So we went back to the laboratory, and we have, so to commemorate our 30th year and my dad's, passing and his anniversary, we have videos now for all of our students in our classrooms that's 10, 12 minutes, perfect YouTube length. The first one is on compassion. The second one's communication. What's the third one, Farhan? We have understanding autism and ADHD, neurodiversity, intrinsic motivation, self-awareness, benefits of proper nutrition, benefits of physical health. So these are things that we are creating on our dime, but putting in for free into the ELA. So parents are paying for ELA and math tutoring, but we're giving them the health stuff.
Yeah.
So
because they may not get that at home.
They're
This is-
not.
right? And
They're
that's the
not
thing.
getting it
yeah.
at home.
They might get just pressure, stress.
Yeah.
I gotta succeed. So they need these other, like your tutorial,
and
to
this is all
instill
for
that.
free. And
Yeah.
so we're just giving this for free, and we're going to make it free on YouTube as well.
It's amazing.
So even if my students had come,
Congratulations on that. That's fantastic what you're doing for the community and the students.
you know, like as they say, like pray for us that it helps and we can reach our goal of helping these kids. But even if we give it to these kids in our classrooms, we have to still train our teachers
Parents.
on the benefit of it. And there you go. Once we train our teachers on on our vision and how we're going to implement that, our teachers, alhamdulillah, they're very proactive in learning new things. But my biggest challenge would be getting it to the parents. How do I get every single parent to sit there and watch video on the importance of communication?
Especially on the old school mentality.
Yeah.
Right? Like not the new generation, but the old generation.
Imagine enforced parent-teacher conference. Like, come in.
Yeah.
I haven't
You have an hour to
You've been
sit.
at Cons, so
Yeah.
you've been with us. So you know when we get the parents in there
Yeah.
and we have them in our waiting rooms and we play our YouTube videos on health and wellness and nurture, And what are they doing? They take out their phone and they're on their
You got a
YouTube.
news or the YouTube.
And then like what's happening in the politics. So I think life is weird. Even though my dad and his dream was always to get everyone helped through me being a doctor, I think consultorial and having the opportunity to work with, now new parents like you all is giving us the chance to share these things, and you guys intuitively get it.
Yeah.
So now you're like, oh snap, okay, I can just send that link to my wife. We can watch it at our own convenience, talk about it for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Right after
promote it to the
bedtime,
kids.
before our Netflix show starts, just
So important.
and reconnecting with your spouse. If you're lucky enough to have that communication channel, I think it's one of the most important things we, as parents, we've seen our parents' generation lose themselves for us. And I don't know if they ever had the opportunity to really focus on each other. And inshallah, with us having these opportunities of having dual income homes and 2 parents that are both college educated, we're a little bit more financially independent for the next section or two, to be able to give that time to each other. Those are all important ingredients in my life personally.
I want to quickly touch base on, and we'll move on to our next segment, if you don't mind. I read, I think in your piece, or I forgot where it was, where you were diagnosed with ADHD or something like that, or...
My daughter was diagnosed with ADHD, and and the physician saw her for like 30 seconds, and she was like 6, and she was going on. He's like, oh yeah, she has it. It wasn't a proper sit down diagnosis.
Assessment, yeah.
Which was like 6 or 8. The cutoff is oftentimes 7. But that threw us into reading about the condition. My son has been officially diagnosed with autism, ADHD, and giftedness. And my daughter and I have a very similar wiring, and I'm very similar to my father in my wiring. I'm certain my father had some aspects of it. I'm certain my mom has aspects of it.
All parents, right, growing up, I'm sure they all did, right, in some capacity.
So my daughter gets mad because I self-diagnosed, but I was like, sweetie, I'm a physician and I've read all the books and I definitely have it, so. But I always want to promote it as a superpower. It's never a condition that I see as a handicap for myself. It's never a condition that I consider a handicap for any of my children or my students. We try our best to destigmatize childhood conditions that are more and more common, and it's going to become rapidly 10 times more common as screen time and internet use and social media use just continues to increase.
Yeah. They have to multitask. They have to consume so much more content. They're as you were talking about the length of your videos, we have to make sure that we don't lose them, because if it's too long, they won't be attentive. So I think it's almost a normalized behavior, even at professionally, at work, you're doing 10 different things, right? And you have to just pick it up and just continue, as you said, as a superpower, as multitasking is seen as the norm.
And multitasking, I think people are resorting to it because our brains are already rewired to be very distracted. We're already programmed to check our phone the next break. And we're watching our favorite, thing on television in a movie. I'm watching my Knicks game and it's the 4th quarter and I'm still like, why am I, we're all, we're all got caught up in that. So those are things that, we'll have to figure out as a society how to get there.
Well, you guys are doing a fantastic job at consultorials. I mean, you guys are kind of setting the precedents, right? To, and I'll definitely transition into our next segment because this kind of ties into it. But I did want to ask you one more question as you were talking.
Yeah.
It seems like we have a lot more content on this than I expected. How do you balance? I know you mentioned therapy, but how do you balance your professional life with your personal life, right? And maybe not mix the two up, because sometimes it's very hard to not do that. Apart from therapy, how are you balancing all this? Because you're a man who wears many hats, right? You're
Yeah.
in your own right, an icon, a generational icon.
Those are your words, not mine at all.
I'll say it because I mean, we, like you said, with our name, we truly believe that in every generation there's an icon or multiple icons who really change the trajectory of their family lineage, right? Your dad did that for himself, for you and his family.
My dad and my mom.
And your mom, right? Your mom and dad both did that. I mean, both of our parents. And now you're doing it for your children and the next generation of, leaders that are coming out of Constant Tutorial. How are you balancing all that? Like, what does that look like? I mean,
That's a really good question. I think it's I've always been someone who's always tried to seek out balance for anything. And you have I have my dad hat, and I have my husband hat, and I have my good friend hat, hopefully, and my supervisor and mentor hat, and some of them have to blend. When I have to, be at work, I have to be professional, and I have to think like a teacher and a school principal, and making sure everyone learns a bunch of new things that day and goes home better for it. And that includes our staff, that includes our parents and our students. But if I'm at home, I'm a goofy motherfucker, it's excuse me for my language, but I can, we're still New Yorkers. We still have we have so much inside that's just a personality. And you just take a walk into the subway, and you take the train from the Bronx down to Brooklyn, and it just resets. The natural New York in all of us kind of is there. So we're all that way. We're one way with our closest friends and our closest people, and for me, that's my kids, my wife, and then of course my closest teammates.
Awesome. So you take time out for yourself, right? To, let's say, spend time with your friends or go and do some activities to say, this is going to be my time for myself and so my me time, right? And I'm going to take a pause from my business side.
Yeah, I mean, if we're lucky, if we're lucky to make time for our friends, and we're lucky for them to make time for us, it's like friends get busy, friends have new developments, friends have new jobs and new kids and new life and new states. So, I'm a big fan of the Knicks. If I can combine having sitting at home and watching the Knicks with a friend, great. If we can go to the game for a really close friend and a fun game, that's another thing. But I think those types of things are more rare, like making that physical time, and it's really expensive, everything. So it's like inflation. It's like if you have two kids and you go outside, it's like $200-$300 just right there for just lunch.
Yeah.
So you have to figure out how to stretch your dollar and figure out how to have fun. So we've seen that means connecting with more families with kids, letting the kids run around and play, and getting more to basics, and the parents can catch up just like how we grew up. So I'm not sure if I answered the question, but making time, I think that's the most important thing I can do in the beginning of the month, writing down the 4 or 5 family or friend outings that I have planned, and everything else is worth doing. All the kosto, all the hard work, all the turmoil, all the stress.
Planning, as you're saying, right? Back when I was younger, without a family, it's like, okay, I could just call someone up, go and do something, right? But now with commitments and everything, like you really have to plan it to make sure that you get that me time, us time, whatever time.
Yeah.
Right. That's apart from what I call homework, taking work, and bringing it home.
And it takes a lot of compromise in a family, so everyone has fun no matter what you're doing, because everyone in the family, you'll as you see, they have 4 different interests.
So growing up, Ivan, one of the things that I remember doing is, especially as the oldest child in the house, you're the first to go through the education system and learn. But if I got stuck on like my homeworks or anything, I benefited from another family member that we knew, and their kids used to like tutor me, help me, like with any homework questions I had. And because I benefited from that, and a lot of new community members were coming in, and they also saw that, okay, Hira graduated, he knows, level 5, level 6, my kid is going to 2nd, 3rd grade. Let me reach out to Hira and learn, get some assistance from him. So a lot of this was done on just goodwill. Like, all right, I got help. Someone helped someone else also. But we never go to the point of like, especially when there's a lot of demand, you kind of partition yourself like, okay, I can only have one person. I don't really have time because I'm focused on other things. But to take that and say, okay, I want to grow it, I want to scale it and start off somewhere. Can you give us some sort of, how did you guys kick off? Like, what was that turning point to say, this is something beyond just a one-on-one interaction and a one-off interaction?
I think we alluded to the first lesson being $25 for like an hour and a half. And my father didn't want to accept the money. He's like, no, I mean, help go up there, make it. Like he just similarly, he knew the material. He wasn't doing this for a business.
Right.
But it was at the insistence of the customer. He said, no, আমি যদি আপনাকে পয়সাটা না দিই, আপনি seriously নেবেন না, আপনি ঠিকমতো শেষ করবেন না, আমার মেয়েকে পড়ানো. So I think when you have something that can make it a little bit more formal, even if it's a small nominal fee, it's way better to get that relationship recognized as this is a measurement of the value of your time.
Right.
And if you know,
and you feel accountable then,
yeah,
right?
Otherwise, then you have accountability to that student's success.
Yeah.
That student has accountability to showing up to your lessons.
Right.
And so often we have a lot of new people who join us as hires, and they're in college, they're at NYU, they're at Princeton, they're at Columbia, and they started out, they have prior tutoring experience, which we love. We always love that. So, when we ask, hey, how come you're not continuing that? Sometimes the canceling by the family at the convenience because there's a dawat. And now you're shaking your head because you know that happens. And now they're like, okay, let me cancel because let me quickly save a quick 1 week of tuition. Or the kid doesn't want to do it because it's boring. So the kid's like, no, can you tell my tutor we're busy? I used to try to sneak around and not go to my English tutor as a high school student. And I used to come up with elaborate, next week I have to do this. I don't think I can make it. And I got permission to skip out 1 week. And the teacher was like, well, actually, that's better for me. So I say this because formalizing and having someone value your time, whether it's your family, especially, your family is never going to appreciate how valuable your time is.
Right.
So it's really important that there are some parameters where you create a distance where it's not done in the house. It's not done in your Kala's house. It's meet me at this premium and we'll have a cha meet me at Nero. Meet me at the restaurant and we'll go do an hour. We'll have samosan, but at least there's meet me at the library,
right.
So I think if you have a little bit of a formal setup, then you can establish things like a curriculum, a fixed fee, a scaling fee in case you want to help everyone. And based on that, if that is something you enjoy, then your demand will happen based on how well you teach.
Right.
And how well your
word will spread.
Yeah,
right?
Word spreads as if you were a good teacher and the results are there.
Yeah.
But I think those are the things I'd say early on, like avoid your dining room and avoid your parents making the appointments for you. You got to learn how to pick up the phone and make the appointment and say this is their rate. And too often, youth, we fall on family members to have that conversation, and we're losing that skill of how to talk to someone. And so it's like, if you're going to be the one teaching, why is someone else kind of setting it up for you anyway?
Right.
So you may have to, if you're going to be in it, you may have to be ready for every aspect of it.
Right. So when did you make that determination to say, all right, I can't just meet in, one-on-one in a library. I'm having 10 people. Word spread.
That
What
took
told-
4 years. 4 years. There was a lot of demand for an office.
Okay.
That was from 1994 to 1998. My father enjoyed teaching one-on-one because he wanted to.
You're invested in making sure this
Yeah.
person succeeds.
And at most, sometimes he'd have a sibling. So maybe he'd have 2 different levels in an hour and a half session or 2 hours. But it was, too difficult to serve all of his students by car and going house to house.
Right.
So when we remembered the first office on 73rd Street, it was no bigger than this, cozy studio. And that, but he had 4 years of students he'd already had. So he was able to get them to meet him there.
Right.
And then as that grew, we were able to get into bigger offices.
Got it.
So when we had him go through his bout with cancer, we were also, one of the offices was going through renovation, and my mom and I had to figure out how to balance the cost of the rent and figure out how to hire and how to make sure students still showed up.
Right.
And even though we did that for the first time 20 years ago, when my father was completing his bone marrow transplant, we did that 9 times in the last 2 years.
Oh, wow.
We had to rebuild and open up 9 centers in about 27, 30 months.
Wow.
And
That's accelerated.
it's not something we would advise anyone. I don't think there's a single business professor that would ever advise that.
Yeah, because how do you, that's one of the things, right? Now you go from,
Sustainability is one
I'm monitoring something, right? And now I'm going to sort of hand off and let other people monitor it and maintain the quality. So how did you oversee all of that?
I think that's the number one question I always get. How do you oversee 10 locations at once?
But I think it's the core values, right? I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I might be wrong, but it might be core values that you've instilled from, obviously coming from family, but also into the leaders that you have today.
Inshallah. Inshallah, meaning I hope that's what it is. I hope it's the time that we dedicate to our training. I hope it's that time that we dedicate. If we can hire really well, then it may take a little longer, but we don't have to work with candidates that aren't ready to grow and learn. If they are ready to grow and learn, we show them ahead of time. This is how long the training will be. This is how long your first 4 to 6 months post-training will be at these centers. If you're keeping an open mind, we see this turning into a bigger job after 4 to 6 months, but at this other center that already exists or may exist in 6 months. So there's a lot of things that's happening and being planned in the back end that a lot of our teachers are being told step by step when we're ready. So this next month, we're start opening up our newest location in the corner of Hillside and Parsons. It's
Congratulations.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
congrats.
Correct. Is it your ninth
It's our
location?
9th location. It's going to be our largest office. It's alhamdulillah in the middle of a very busy part of Hillside Avenue and Parsons Boulevard. And
Yeah, that's a huge Bangladeshi community area. I think.
we get a chance to work again with some landlords and some building developers that have had a really strong relationship with for 20 years. And we're really hoping that the response is, inshallah, a two-way. We want to be there to uplift and work with the community as long as the community is ready to have us there again. And, we've seen a few places move into, our old neighborhoods. We've had an instance or two where a few places try to move into our old office. And we're glad to say that those tactics haven't progressed well for others, and we're just keeping our focus on our lane, and we're really proud, inshallah, and grateful for the families that are excited to come back.
So when you guys determined the curriculum and stuff, right, you could teach so many subjects, right? and so forth. So I know you guys teach multiple, but is there, where does it stop? Where do you say, you know what, this is what I'm going to focus on in terms of the key subjects that are going to be in demand from even like a business model to say, all right, I want to specialize in this area?
I think that's a great question. I think anything that helps Bangladeshi New Yorkers, first and foremost, is my first intuition. And if it helps Bangladeshi New Yorkers, then hopefully it helps West Indian New Yorkers and Latin New Yorkers and Black New Yorkers. I don't think often enough about how can it help people in New Jersey? How can it help people in Connecticut? How can it help people in California? And I think that's a tunnel vision that I have to work on and grow out of, so we can think more widely.
Right.
I think the work that we do is so personally tied to my family and being from the one-bedroom apartment in Elmhurst that no matter how large the company gets, my mind is always in that first
That's your
bedroom
passion,
apartment
right?
in
Like,
Elmhurst.
yeah, it's your passion. Is something you can reflect on and go like, this is what I went through. This is what I'm hearing. This is the demand from my local community. How can I address this demand? So, I think-
And the local community needs, the public school system has absolutely failed immigrant New Yorkers. And that's why we're here. If they can fix it, then we'll go do something else.
I
But
agree.
if the stuff that we're doing, they should be delivering way before we do. And students should get it as a part of being an everyday citizen. But the school system fails our families and our children, and my community. And it's my father and mother and me and our team and my wife who want to take that challenge to fix education, not for Bangladeshis, but for all New Yorkers.
Yeah, like when I see some of the stats, especially comparing U.S. education to internationally, we're doing very poorly.
We're like
And it's-
37th and 40th.
And it's
in
not
certain
improving.
Places. And healthcare, we're 37th and 40th. And education, we're like late 60s.
Yeah,
67, 66.
both English and math and everything, and
Yeah,
it's just it's you know, when you think of America, you know, there's a lot to be proud for, and education, unfortunately, one of them is areas that we can definitely improve on.
I wish I could be more proud of this country right now, of America right now. But that's
Agreed,
not something I can openly say because of funding blindly what we all deem as a genocide.
Yeah.
And it's really tough to feel proud and think about the colors red, white, and blue. I think so much of it is propaganda from the start. America was founded on slavery and really, really horrible things, and we're constantly told that we're the good guys. It doesn't really feel like we're the good guys. America.
Yeah, it's a huge contrast, and the way I grew up, where I definitely saw it as a huge land of opportunity. Just seeing,
that's still
I guess, success,
happens to be true.
right, and legacy, like generational icons. So when I think backwards, I'm like, there was so many great things, but then when you see the fact and the reality of what's actually behind the scenes,
Exactly.
behind running all of this, is sort of the corruption. It's crazy in almost every
aspect, political
aspect of life,
corruption,
right?
to the school systems, to
and
city
humanity.
hall,
Like I
council.
we were taught about abolishment of slavery, how Holocaust was horrible. So it was instilled in us and ingrained in us that justice, you know, safety of life, that we are all equal. Our Constitution, when you reflect on those values, you're like, it's there in the Constitution, but in actual application and reality, it's not. And
It's like a fancy advertisement. It's marketing.
it's a wake-up call for a lot of us.
It's marketing to keep all of these.
So I'm glad you
kids-
brought up the pride and so forth. A lot of us are feeling that now and are questioning, like, where is everything headed to?
Yeah, you can feel proud for a lot of the things on a national level. Hopefully, you can be proud of your neighbors, your parents, your family.
Yeah.
Maybe you're lucky if you have a school with administration that cares. Inshallah, I hope to my core that people feel that nurture and safety at any con's location, at any con's classroom, digitally on Zoom or in person.
Yeah. And it's diverse, right? It's not just Bangladeshi students. As you
We
said,
have-
you have a lot of, you know, different ethnicities.
I think that's the amazing thing about New York. Most of our first neighbors were Latin Black and West Indian and Eastern European and Latin American. Like, so it's such a melting pot that's why when we started this conversation, I'm a Bangladeshi New Yorker first. You've never heard me say I'm an American throughout the entire hours that we spent together. So,
For those that are watching, and you've inspired, I'm sure, a lot of people. You inspired us. How have you, as you're growing, right? You're going to your ninth location. What is it like going from first location to the second location? Because you kind of witnessed that you were there, but now going from
20 years ago or this time? Because the first time around, it was me and my mom while my dad was really sick. And we had a lot more time. So it was like 2004 was location number 2. 2007 was location number 3. Then 2008, then 2010, 2011. But this time it's like 2-3 locations per year just to get back. So, and both times it was my mother and I at the steering wheel. Yeah. My father's always been, promoting to make sure we could reach as many people as possible. But so what's the question? How has it been?
Yeah, I mean,
it sounds like it accelerates because you get efficient in doing like it takes a little bit more time at the beginning, but as you're growing, it seems like, okay, I can do this more quickly, more rapidly.
It's sometimes not even.
I mean, is it easier? Do you think it's easier from going from one location to another versus going from 2 to 9? Right? Or is it
more like 3 locations at once?
Right? 3. I would never advise anyone to open up more than one place at once.
Okay.
It's not something that we ever do by design.
Okay.
And when I say that, it's something that we don't do on purpose.
Okay.
Or intentionally. But that doesn't mean sometimes you won't see an organization have to do that. Sometimes you have to open up 2 locations at once because
the demand is there.
Speed matters. If you don't do it, the demand is there, hopefully.
Right.
And if the demand isn't there and you know that speed matters, but the demand can be there and you know you can generate that demand or something else is coming down the pipeline, then you have to get out of your comfort zone and stretch yourself thin and go into debt and be unhappy and stressed. Yeah. For anyone, for an expansion conversation, that's a whole nother episode. I'd love to just sit and talk about, but it's not something that we look forward to doing too much. We would love to just focus on what the ninth and what we have now and just be here, parked here for as long as we can.
Are you comfortable sharing, not numbers, but kind of get an idea for those who are inspired to open up something similar to what you have right now? Obviously, in the digital age, things are different with AI and all that. What would you recommend, or what are some of the strategies you would give someone who is inspired to open something like?
I think with anyone who's looking to open a small business, I think the most important things are knowing your numbers, knowing what the cost would be. If you're going to be doing something starting off, you don't want to get an office if you don't have students yet. You could start at your home, but I would always advise like a public place so you maintain safety for the student and the teacher.
Yeah.
Whether it's a library, coffee shop, things of that nature. Maybe you can lend your efforts to a program that exists at your school or your campus and find out pathways from there. For those who've joined our team, we are one of the largest employers of South Asian youth in New York City. I think they enjoy the regular hours. They know they're always going to get students. Like they show up at 9:30, they can leave at 4:30, and they know they're going to get those hours. We're not sending people home regularly or anything like that. So I think that consistency helps. For anyone who's coming into the space, trying with a site, absolutely pay attention to your rent, your utilities, your supplies. there's a lot we can add to the list. Your payroll costs. Marketing budget probably has to come last because you can't
You have to
pay
build
for your
the
marketing if you can't pay your rent.
right.
And then you got to pay your so rent and staff and paying yourself something for your time. Those can be your biggest expenses.
Right.
So you got to keep in mind what the cost may be per lesson or per student, and see if you can get as many students to cover those costs. And if you're very good at teaching, then you can enjoy some growing pains, as we call them, of like, you have the demand and how do you help accommodate that? And that takes you to the next level of new opportunities, but new things to learn and figure out.
Challenges as well,
Does that drive you to like taking up loans, or were you just able to, you made enough savings and just reinvest that into scaling it, right?
I am grateful to say that, our time in the market for 30 years has helped us a lot.
Okay. Awesome.
So would you agree to say first to market is sometimes better than going to market?
No, not at all. Because first to market means that everyone gets to copy you. So as a company that's been around for 30 years, we've had our logo replicated and duplicated. We've had people try to use a similar name. We've had people use similar curriculum. We've had rivals. And it's not the entire tutoring industry. It could be one or two bad players. But you see enough of, while they say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, it can, it's a lot of pressure to constantly evolve, to keep up with the rapidly changing times. And if you're not willing to do that, in any type of industry, it's tough to survive. So I think you're gonna have to really love what you do to be successful at anything.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful that not only do I love what I do at Cons, but hopefully enough people who work on our team enjoy being a part of this. And creating the impact that we strive for.
Awesome.
That's awesome. I mean, can you speak a little bit about, Ivan, about the marketing piece behind it, right? So let's say someone is already established or they're slowly looking to grow. Because correct me if I'm wrong, you mentioned that you have 5,000 students, or you have
our track record.
Right.
Yes, our track record of helping the number of students get into the specialized high schools is stronger and higher than any other program in New York City, whether it's the last 10 years, 20 years, 25 years, 30 years. We've kept, we're very purposeful about our data and following what's happening with our students and where they're headed. So not only do we have the 4,750 plus students at the specialized high schools, those are just three or a handful. There's more than 10,000 students that have gone on to colleges with their careers, and now they are your kids' pediatricians, inshallah, and our children's, daycare operators, and they're charter school principals now, and they're surgeons, God forbid, and they're pharmacists for the local things for Amma, so.
That wide benefit, it's, you may not think about it initially, but the long-term effect is amazing. Throughout the community,
just creating generational impact.
And that's what we're most proud of. I mean, this summer we had 4 weddings. 3-4 weddings that we went to, and they're all Cons alum, and they're all doing their PhD studies and going to law school, and they're all professionals. And
you've seen them since they were.
I've seen them maybe since they were youth. When they were in the program, maybe they came back to work for us as university students. And as first or second years university students, it's very likely that we got involved in getting them trained into becoming our managers and eventually our company leaders. So those bonds of growing up
Yeah.
together, sharing.
You would say they've become part of the Khan tutorial family.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
They've been, they were there when my children were born,
Oh,
at the hospital. They,
Wow.
at the second day, they're knocking on the door, waiting to meet their nephew, Ian, or their niece, Ariana. When our daughter, Ariana, was born, she was born on a Tuesday morning or a Monday morning. And that Friday evening, we hadn't been home for 2 days. And I ran for some emergency items, like new things for a newborn. And 12 people were at our door with like a gift basket. Everyone had a different gift.
wow.
And it was a surprise, and we still have every single one of the gifts. And then when our son Ian was born, we had leaders show up at the hospital the next day, just knocking, waiting to meet Ian. And Eid is at their house, often, and every single Ramadan we go to one person's house for an iftar. Every single third Sunday of Ramadan, we know
Sweet.
we're gonna go to
Somebody's house.
we know we're gonna go to Nilay's house for that. So it's
It's lifelong.
yeah, it's lifelong. And to something from before, I don't get an opportunity to make as much time for my lifelong friends from college, from my own high school, but I probably get more time with my younger brothers and sisters in Nipa and my extended family at Cons.
Sweet. So we like to, give you the opportunity to share anything with our users. If you want to share one or two statements, as like pointers, takeaways, whatever you want to share.
Any piece of advice for the younger generation that's coming up, for us or for people who are inspired by your story?
Assalamu alaikum. I want to first of all thank Generational Icons, Shaquille, Hira, and their entire team here at the studio for today. If you've been watching and you've reached this point, thank you. It is a privilege to be a part of this community of Bangladeshi New Yorkers. It's a privilege to have our family be involved in your education or any other type of help or community service or connecting that we can do just for one another. While we've been here for quite some time as an organization, Generational Icons is really here to make sure that continues and to reflect stories of some of the earliest families. It's just chronologic, and I look forward to seeing so many more episodes of the greater community, and just to be a part of the early interviews. It's really a privilege to myself, my wife Nipa, our children Ariana, Ian, and of course my mom, Mrs. Khan. So thank you all for watching, and if y'all ever need anything, follow us on Instagram at Consultorial, and reach out to us, hit us up, visit our centers, and we cannot wait to see how we can help. So thank you so much for believing in us, and we can't wait to see where you all go.
Thank you, Dr. Khan.
Thank
we really
you.
appreciate you taking the time out of your day. It means a lot to us. I've said it multiple times. But I do appreciate that, honestly. We all appreciate
Thank you
it.
so much
And our team here as well.
for your time.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you.